I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition. This
Ooh.
is our first episode of our new setup where I do the heavy lifting of true crime and Katie does the heavy lifting of pop culture. So if you like it, like, subscribe, comment, share with others, and let us know your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Unless your thoughts are, I only liked when Katie did true crime.
Yeah, then don't make Mary sad.
Yeah. Keep that to yourself.
We just decided we should do what we love the most.
Yeah.
That's all.
I don't have any real-time true crime.
Mm-hmm. My real-time true crime is in the tidbits for pop culture. Other than, I guess, a judge ruled and shortened the Menendez brothers' sentences, so they're now eligible for parole. Yeah, it feels like that was like kind of a while ago, but yeah. So we'll see.
The FBI is trying to come to Memphis to solve all of our problems, apparently. I think my favorite thing about that is that, like, everyone on TikTok that's from Memphis is, like, in agreement of, like, please leave us alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're fine.
Meanwhile, in St. Louis, we're begging for FEMA because for some reason our mayor said, we're good here. We don't need any help. And everyone said, speak for yourself.
All right.
So,
ready?
Yes.
Okay. In 1999, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police received a tip about the operator of a pig farm in Port Coquitlam.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
About an hour from Vancouver. The person who had called it in claimed that their friend, Lynn Ellingsen, had told them some disturbing things about the proprietor of the farm, Robert Pickton. On August 10th, 1999, police brought Lynn in for questioning, but she denied knowing anything about Robert Pickton harming sex workers or other women besides herself. However, only 3 years later, in 2002, she would bring them a very different story. At this time, she called in a tip to the RCMP stating that she had seen a deceased woman hanging in the slaughterhouse of Pickton's farm. When asked why she had denied it in 1999, she said that she had been afraid of Pickton and that their relationship had become one where she depended on him financially, specifically in terms of affording her addiction. After receiving Lynn's tip, police raided Pickton's pig farm and found illegal firearms, women's clothing, handcuffs, jewelry, and an asthma inhaler prescribed to Serena Abbotsway. 29-year-old Serena Abbotsway had disappeared almost exactly a year earlier from downtown East Vancouver. She had been reported missing by her foster mother, whom she normally checked in with daily. Police also found blood on the property, which they linked to a 26-year-old missing woman named Mona Wilson. Similarly to Serena, Mona went missing from downtown Eastside Vancouver after she was seen stumbling into a car, seemingly drunk, and being driven away. Now,
hello, frequent listeners. Is this so familiar?
Yeah. If you're thinking, I feel like I've heard this before, that may be because Katie covered Serena and Mona's murders on her episode about the Highway of Tears, but today we're doing a deep dive into the life and crimes of Robert Pickton and all of his victims.
All?
Look, I did my best.
We'll be here forever.
I know. Not like... I did my best to give you as much as I could about, like, where they're from, what their life was like, how they disappeared.
Yeah.
All of that. Are you ready?
Yes, so ready.
Robert William Pickton, who often went by the nickname Willie, was born on October 24th, 1949, to Leonard Pickton and Louise Arnall, two pig farmers in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Willie had an older sister, Linda, and a younger brother, David. Early on, Linda was sent to live with a different family member in Vancouver because her parents felt like a pig farm was an inappropriate place to raise a girl.
Because it's gross.
Yeah.
Ew.
On the other hand, Willie and David were put right to work. In
On
fact,
the other hand, maybe we should have normalized them being around girls.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe not, actually.
Working on the farm quickly became the only thing that mattered for the boys. It was noted by classmates and teacher that Louise prioritized work over caring for her sons. They were bullied in school because they often showed up wearing unwashed clothes, dirty with pig manure.
Oh, yeah.
Other kids called them stinky piggies.
Oh, but like, that's kind of cute. Iconic.
Little stinky piggy.
Just so cute. Yeah, I feel like they had to be pinching their cheeks while they said that.
Stinky piggies. Because of this, Willie did not have friends and struggled in school. His father was abusive, and so he became very attached to his mother. Willie failed the second grade and was moved into a full-time special education classroom from then on. Before the least restrictive environment thing, but okay. Anyway, outside of his mother, Willie's best friend was a calf he had begun raising when he was 12 years old. He took care of it for 2 weeks, and in that time he grew very attached to it as a pet. But one day he came home from school and he couldn't find the baby anywhere. His parents told him to check in the barn, and he found that it had been slaughtered without him knowing.
And they knew that?
Yeah.
They said, go find it.
Yeah, go check the barn.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Willie Pickton dropped out of school in 1963 and began working as an apprentice meat cutter.
Okay.
He held this job for 7 years and then left to begin working full-time on the family farm. His father died in 1978, followed by his mother in 1979, which left the 3 siblings to inherit the pig farm. Willie began to grow pretty wealthy through his work on the farm. He sold different areas of the property to property developers, earning about 5.16 million Canadian dollars. And by the earning 5.16 million Canadian dollars by the 1990s. He and his brother also rented out one of the buildings on the property for dances, concerts, events, and even as a nightclub that they referred to as the Piggy Palace.
Oh, entrepreneurs.
Yeah, my first thought was like Prince Mongo's castle.
Yeah.
The Piggy Palace attracted political and economic elites from the lower mainland, as well as the local division of the Hells Angels.
Okay.
What a crowd.
Are these bikers?
Yeah, the Hells Angels is a biker gang. The brothers were sued by Port Coquitlam officials for violating zoning ordinances for illegally renting out the barn and neglecting the agriculture and farming operations the farm required. So, like,
even with their political friends?
I know.
Couldn't they stop that?
They weren't like upkeeping the farm. Sure. They were just using it for parties. Yeah. In 1996, they registered a nonprofit charity that they called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society.
That does not sound like a charity.
Which they claimed was dedicated to, quote, organizing, coordinating, managing, and operating special events, functions, dances, shows, and exhibitions on behalf of service organizations, sports other organizations, and other worthy groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. With this, the brothers continued to host parties and raves in their converted slaughterhouse. As many as 2,000 people could be found at these wild parties at any given time, which heavily consisted of sex workers and motorcycle gang members.
Yeah.
On top of the political elites.
Yeah, what are y'all doing there?
Political elites, what's happening?
I don't like this.
They were warned that they would face legal trouble if they continued to have events on their farm, but instead of listening, they held a New Year's Eve party. After this, they received an injunction banning future parties and authorizing the RCMP to arrest and remove any person found to be attending an event at the farm.
Mm.
The Picktons lost their nonprofit status the following year for failing to produce financial statements.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't really a nonprofit.
Yeah. Also, like, in what world is, like, throwing events for companies
Right.
not for profit?
Right. Renting out your property.
Yeah, what is that mean? It didn't
is for a profit.
Yeah, what?
Despite the attraction to the farm, it was described by employees of the property as a creepy-looking place.
I bet it
guarded,
was. They
guarded
literally
by,
said it's unsanitary. Y'all should not be doing this.
Yeah. This is crazy to me. Guarded by a 612-pound boar.
The farm?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Weigh in. Is that an exaggeration? If you know boars, can they weigh that much?
Like
That's 2 times what my husband weighs.
Average boar size. Nope, that's just the height. Average they weigh between 150 and 220.
Yeah. I feel like that was
In
an
Northeast
exaggeration.
Asia, they can reach up to 270 kilograms, which is 600 pounds.
Oh.
But
It's an Asian boar.
yes, perhaps. But for people who are not even keeping up the pig farm part of the pig farm, that
Right.
seems kind of crazy that they came across a record-breaking sized boar. But I'm not sure I'm buying it, Willie.
I feel like 612 pounds is very specific.
Yeah.
For them to be like over exaggerating, you know, like they're like, oh, that boar is like 612 pounds.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like that had to have been somewhere. But was it in their nonprofit documents? Because we can't trust those.
Right. This is what an employees described. They were like, this place is awful. It's guarded by this giant ass boar.
I don't know. 612 is like a number I might pull out of my ass. Sometimes I'll be like, I've done this 156 times. And like, obviously I didn't do it 156 times. So maybe that employee just loves a little drama.
They also described Willie Pickton himself as off-putting, saying
I thought you were going to say it's 612 pounds. They also
I would believe that before I would believe that a pig is 600 pounds. Like, a boar is just a giant pig.
Yeah.
Pigs can't weigh that much.
So he's off-putting.
Yes. They said he was a pretty quiet guy who was hard to strike up a conversation with. And they agreed that he showed strange behaviors and would draw attention to himself, though they had no reason to believe that this was due to any sort of substance abuse issues. They were like, let's be clear. It's not because he's drunk. It's not because he's high. He's just fucking strange. Weird.
Yeah. Just odd.
Yeah. On March 23rd, 1997, Willie Pickton was charged with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and forcible confinement after a one-woman show. After a young woman named Wendy Lynn Ellingsen, who worked as a sex worker, claimed she had been kidnapped and brought back to the farm. According to Wendy, Pickton had handcuffed her and stabbed her 4 times with a kitchen knife. She disarmed him and stabbed him with the same kitchen knife, escaping the farm. She ran to the road and flagged down a passing car. The driver drove her to Eagle Ridge Hospital, where she was rushed into emergency surgery to tend to her serious stab wounds. At the same time, Pickton arrived at Eagle Ridge Hospital seeking treatment for his stab wounds. While a hospital orderly was working with Pickton, he found a small key in his pocket that he believed could have belonged to the handcuffs the other patient was wearing. Sure enough, they were a match to the handcuffs on Wendy, and Pickton was immediately arrested. He claimed that he had picked up Wendy as a hitchhiker and that she had attacked him at random. He was released on a $2,000 Canadian bond, and on January 27th, 1998, the charges against him were stayed because Wendy had a history of substance abuse, and prosecutors considered her to be unstable as a witness.
Yeah.
Cool. But not the guy who directly disobeyed y'all and
he
threw
said
more parties.
He said,
his
yeah,
farm.
she attacked me. So then I handcuffed her.
Of course.
Before proceeding to stab her.
Of course.
But not deadly stab.
Right. She was literally incapacitated because I handcuffed her and she was no longer threatening me, but just for good measure.
Not even murder, just for good measure for just torture.
The Pickton brothers were no strangers to violent crime at this point. In 1992, David Pickton had been convicted of sexual assault for attacking a woman in his trailer at the pig farm. This woman managed to escape and press charges, and David was fined 1,000 Canadian dollars and given 30 days probation.
Wow. Serves him right.
Yeah. And obviously it worked because he wasn't the one that became a serial killer.
Yes, of course. That's on rehabilitation.
In 1999, around the time that Lynn Ellingsen was originally interviewed, an employee at the farm had found several purses on the property that belonged to several Indigenous women, sex workers, and women with substance abuse disorders that had begun going missing in the Lower Mainland in the downtown east side of Vancouver and reported it to police. They conducted 3 separate searches on the farm, but were unable to uncover any of the evidence that employee had reported. In June of 1999, police received a new tip claiming that Pickton was keeping a freezer full of human flesh in his farmhouse, which the police chose not to look into.
They said, that sounds kind of yucky. We don't want to go see. No, thank you.
Gross.
I mean, agreed, but...
Right. Big mistake. When they re-interviewed Lynn Ellingsen after her own report in 2002, both Pickton brothers were arrested and police were able to obtain a second warrant as part of the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry based on the evidence they had seen on the property. In this search, they found several personal items belonging to missing women that they had just overlooked the first time, I suppose.
They said, actually, that is a purse right there, but it looks very normal.
Wait, that wasn't there last time. Willie and David were both charged with weapons offenses, but were later released. However, Willie was kept under police surveillance after his release. He was arrested again on February 22nd, 2002, and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of Serena Abbotsway and Mona Wilson. This began a 2-year search of the grounds of the farm, where police would eventually uncover DNA linked to 33 different missing women and would charge Pickton with 26 counts of first-degree murder. On April 2nd, On April 2nd, 2002, Pickton was charged with the murders of Jacqueline McDonald, Diane Rock, and Heather Bottomley. So he gets charged in these batches. So I'm going to go by the batches and explain who they were. Jacqueline Michelle McDonald lived in Trial, British Columbia with her mother, stepfather, and daughter. When her daughter was born, she was only 18 years old and she dropped out of school. Her remains were found on the Pickton farm. 22-year-old Jacqueline had been reported missing on January 16th, 1999. Diane Rosemary Rock was born in Ontario. I don't know why that came out so. Born in Ontario to her 15-year-old mother. The two of them lived with another family and their young daughter, and they ended up adopting Diane. Diane herself got pregnant when she was 15 and dropped out of school. She began living on her own, then got married in 1985, and by the age of 20, she had 3 children. In 1991, after a divorce, she began working in the healthcare industry in Welland. She remarried and moved to Brantford, Ontario, and then to British Columbia, where she and her second husband had 2 more children. In 2000, she separated from her second husband and moved to Vancouver's downtown east side. 34-year-old Diane had been reported missing by her social worker on December 13th, 2001. Her DNA was later found on the Pickton farm. Heather Kathleen Bottomley had grown up in New Westminster, where she had a shortstop, or sorry, not had, where she was a shortstop and catcher in baseball. When she was in 9th grade, she started dating someone who introduced her to drugs. They dropped out of school, and she eventually became pregnant. 27-year-old Heather Bottomley had been reported missing on April 17th, 2001, while she was pregnant with her second child and living in East Vancouver. At the time, police labeled her as a violent suicide risk, but her DNA was later found on the Pickton farm. On April 9th, 2002, Pickton was charged with the murders of Andrea Joesbury and Brenda Wolfe.
Is it like Dorothea Puente, where they're like doing like quadrants of the farm, like
yeah, I think
type
so.
of situation?
So,
okay.
Yes, they spent 2 years searching the farm, and
like just
most
digging
of it,
up the ground.
Yeah, and I mean like
other ways too,
yes,
but
yes, because you'll see like most of them it's just DNA that was found. There are some whose remains were found, and so they had been buried there, and then there were some whose DNA was found in like specific places that would not have been outside.
Okay.
So they're just doing like a full sweep of this place and also
and then running tests of everything.
Yeah. Andrea grew up in Victoria. She was close with her family and was involved in both sports and theater. When Andrea was 16, she began dating a 36-year-old man, and she ran away with him. They moved to Vancouver's downtown east side and had a child. When her boyfriend went to prison, their child was removed from her care. 22-year-old Andrea had been reported missing on June 8th, 2001. Andrea kept in regular contact with her family, and it was unusual for her to miss a phone call with them. So they were like, what? No. That's why she was reported missing. At the time of her disappearance, she was in a methadone program to combat her opioid addiction. So several people were surprised to not have heard from her at that point.
Mm-hmm. She's in recovery. She's like
right. She's like actively
doing well,
speaking with doctors and like people who around the clock kind of care for her. Brenda Ann Wolfe was born in Lethbridge, Alberta. She was a member of the Kakawishtahow First Nation, which is a Saskatchewan First Nation, in Calgary. After Brenda was born, her parents went on to have 2 more girls and 2 boys. Brenda's mother left when she was young to focus on her battle with alcoholism, and Brenda lived with her father's family. In 1980, Brenda was able to move in with her mother and confided in her that she had been abused by members of her father's family. After moving in with her mother, Brenda thrived. She became a champion on her school's badminton team and completed her hairdresser certification in 1991. Brenda had 2 daughters, and in 1996, she moved to Vancouver. She was common law married to a man who abused her, and Brenda had been living in a shelter to stay away from him. At the time of her disappearance, Brenda was working as both a waitress and a bouncer in the bar in the Balmoral Hotel in Vancouver's downtown east side. 32-year-old Brenda had been reported missing on April 25th, 2000. She was a well-known figure in her community, whom people regarded as protective but soft-spoken and well-liked. Brenda's remains were found on the property of the Pickton farm. On September 20th, 2002, Pickton was charged with the murders of Georgina Papin, Patricia Johnson, Helen Hallmark, and Jennifer Firminger. Georgina Faith Papin was raised with 8 siblings on the Habima Reserve as a member of the Enoch Cree Nation. When Georgina was growing up, she and her siblings were in and out of foster care and residential schools. Eventually, they were all placed in the same foster home, but Georgina began to experience abuse there and ran away at the age of 12. By the age of 14, Georgina was living in Las Vegas. While there, she gave birth to her first child. Georgina moved back to Vancouver, and her child stayed behind in Las Vegas with her grandparents. In Vancouver, Georgina had 3 boys and 3 girls, 2 of whom were twins. Georgina was heavily involved in her culture and was a talented traditional dancer, beater, and crafter who was a regular attendee of powwows. She was active in the volunteer group, the Native Sisterhood Association, which aims to bring women in touch with their traditions. 34-year-old Georgina had gone missing in March of 2001. She had last been seen being dropped off at the Aboriginal Friendship Center on Hastings Street, and her remains were later found on the Pickton farm. I think, I don't know, when I read that that's where she was last seen, I was like, of course that's where she was last seen. That was, it sounds like that was kind of, her whole life was, really being in touch with her culture and, volunteering with her culture. And so then I was like, how icky if that is where he grabbed her from.
Yeah.
That he's going to these specific places to seek out these women that he thinks people won't miss.
Yeah.
Helen
it's also possible, I guess, that that's just where she was seen. Helen May Hallmark was the second of 4 children and was born in Maple Ridge, British Columbia. During her childhood, Helen was abused by both her mother and her mother's partner. At one point, after a particularly violent incident, Helen was placed into foster care. Helen eventually got married and had a daughter and made the decision to put her up for adoption to give her a chance at what she thought would be a better life. Helen moved to Vancouver's downtown east side and began to struggle with addiction. She kept in touch with her family and was said by them to have been protective, strong, resilient, and having endurance. Mm-hmm.
I just put protective, strong, resilient, and endurance. She was endurance.
She is endurance.
Her family was surprised not to hear from her during certain holidays, which is when they suspected she may be missing. 20-year-old Helen had last been seen on June 15th, 1997. Helen's DNA was later found on the Pickton farm. Jennifer Lynn Firminger was born in Northern Ontario. She was adopted as a toddler and was then raised in St. Catharines, Ontario. Jennifer left home in 1989 and gave birth to a son. Her family said she enjoyed reading and going fishing with her father. 28-year-old Jennifer had been reported missing on December 27th, 1999. On October 3rd, 2002, Pickton was charged with the murders of Heather Chinnick, Tanya Holick, Sherry Irving, and Inga Hall. Heather Gabrielle Chinnick was born in 1970 in Denver, Colorado, but grew up in the Kootenay area of British Columbia. She moved to Surrey, British Columbia, and had 2 children. 30-year-old Heather had last been seen in April of 2001. Tanya Holick's family was a part of the Scatton First Nation from the Pemberton area. She moved a lot in her childhood. She was born in Vancouver, then moved to Lytton, then Agassiz, and Chilliwack, and then finally moved to East Vancouver with her mother and aunt as a teenager and went to high school there. In 1978, Tanya's aunt, Belinda Williams, went missing in Vancouver's downtown east side and has never been found. When Tanya was 20 years old, she and her common-law partner had a son together. They separated soon after, but were successfully co-parenting. 23-year-old Tanya had been reported missing on November 3rd, 1996, after failing to show up to her aunt's birthday celebration on October 27th. Her clothing and DNA were found at the Pickton farm. Sherry Lee Irving's family said she was outgoing, goofy, calm, and intelligent, and that her death caused their family a lot of pain. 24-year-old Sherry had been reported missing on February 22nd, 1997. Her niece commented after the fact that her aunt's death affected her growing up. She hadn't never gotten the chance to know her, but she wished she could have, based on what her family said about her. Inga Monique Hall was actually born in Germany and moved to Canada with her family when she was 4 years old. She grew up in Peterborough, Ontario, and ran away at the age of 14. She got married at the age of 19 to a man from Edmonton and gave birth to a daughter. They split, and she met her second husband in Prince George, British Columbia. They moved to Vancouver's downtown east side together and had another daughter. 46-year-old Inga had last been seen in February of 1998.
It's a huge age range.
Yes. Like, I was like, oh, like, she's so much older than the others. But then there are a few in their 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also a few in their 30s, in their 20s. I was like, it's just anybody.
Yeah.
On May 26, 2005, Pickton was charged with the final murders he would be brought to trial for, those of Kara Ellis, Andrea Borhaven, Deborah Lynn Jones, Marnie Frey, Tiffany Drew, Carrie Koski, Sarah DeVries, Cynthia Felix, Angela Jardine, Cindy Crawford, Diana Melnick, and one Jane Doe. 25-year-old Kara had been reported missing on January 21st, 1997, after failing to show up to a doctor's appointment. She was last seen in the hospital, which is where she scheduled that follow-up appointment that she missed. Like, she had been in the hospital, she had to schedule a follow-up, and then she didn't show up to that, is why she was reported missing. Her DNA was found on the Pickton farm and on Robert Pickton's jacket.
Oh, that'll do it.
25-year-old Andrea had last been seen in March of 1997. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when and where, as she had been in witness protection after surviving a violent assault.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I know, is that she was last seen in March of 1997.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I have to interrupt. How long had it been since they were throwing those parties? Like, was that like many years before? Was that like same time range?
It was like in the 90s that they were throwing the parties. So.
And most of these are late 90s.
Yes.
I'm just like, could he just be like, they're just party goers?
Yeah.
Like, yes, the DNA is here, but they're just party goers. What are you talking about?
I think it also depends on where the DNA was found.
Sure.
Because some of it's not found in normal places.
Yeah.
That party goers would be.
Cool.
42-year-old Deborah had last been seen in December of 2000. That's all I know.
Okay.
24-year-old Marnie had been reported missing on December 19th, 1997, around the time of her 24th birthday. Her DNA was found in a wood chipper on the Pickton farm. 27-year-old Tiffany had been reported missing on December 31st, 1999, within hours of her disappearance. At that time, she had 3 children between the ages of 5 and 9. So when she did not show up for them, they were like, what?
Yeah.
Um, 38-year-old Carrie had been reported missing on January 7th, 1998. At the time, she was said to have been self-medicating to cope with the loss of her husband to suicide. Her family went on to found the Missing Women League Society and began running a recovery house in Maple Ridge after her disappearance. 29-year-old Sarah had last been seen in April of 1998 at the corner of Princess and Hastings. 43-year-old Cynthia had last been seen in December of 1997 and was reported missing in 1998, 1999, and 2001 after her family continued to not hear from her. Her remains were located on the Pickton farm. 27-year-old Angela had been reported missing on November 20th, 1998. 43-year-old Wendy had last been seen in December of 1999. 23-year-old Diana had last been seen in December of 1995. Her DNA was found on plastic sheet liners in one of the freezers at the Pickton farm. And the Mission Jane Doe Pickton had been charged with had been discovered on February 25th, 1995. So she was not found on the farm.
Oh.
She had been found before.
But then did she match DNA on the farm or something?
I don't know. I guess so. It's hard to look that one up because I can't just look up Jane Doe.
Yeah.
The provincial government had spent about 70 million Canadian dollars by the end of 2003 on this investigation. During this time, forensic anthropologists had used two 50-foot flat conveyor belts and soil sifters to find traces of human remains on the farm. The property was fenced off by the Crown in right of British Columbia. Investigators had a difficult time using forensic analysis on the evidence found on the farm due to the fact that many of the bodies seemed to have been left to decompose or had been eaten by insects or livestock on the farm. On March 10th, 2004, the government announced that they had reason to believe that Pickton may have ground up human flesh and mixed it in with the pork he sold to the public, and they issued a health warning in the area.
It's too late, babes.
Yeah.
It's too late.
It's 2004. It's been 2 years.
Yeah. That pork, either there's a health warning because it's old pork.
If you have 2-year-old pork, we have a different problem.
Or it's been eaten.
Right.
They said, just in case you've kept this in your freezer for 2 years, we want to give you your last chance. Yeah. Throw it away.
Eventually, all of the buildings on Pickton's property, except one barn, were demolished.
Fuck these buildings.
Except for that one barn. The trial of Robert Pickton kicked off on January 30th, 2006 in New Westminster, where he pleaded not guilty to 27 counts of first-degree murder in the Supreme Court of British Columbia.
That is old, my friend.
Right. Due to a strict publication ban, reporters were prohibited from sharing any details about the arguments made in the court during the trial. On March 17th, Justice James Williams dismissed one of the charges due to insufficient evidence. By August 9th, they had decided to split the charges into 2 groups. One group of 6 counts and one group of 20 counts.
Oh. Whoever is in charge
down the middle.
Yeah, whoever's in charge of cutting halves should be fired.
The trial continued with the first group of 6, while the 20 counts were stayed on August 4th, 2010. Justice Williams indicated that trying all 26 charges simultaneously could overwhelm the jury and potentially lead to a mistrial, but 20 much more manageable.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they have researched the jurors. The average juror's brain
can handle 20.
Mm-hmm.
The trial was originally scheduled for January 8th, 2007, but was pushed back to January 22nd. On that day, Pickton faced charges related to the murders of 6 women: Frey, Abbotsway, Papin, Joesbury, Wolfe, and Wilson. As the media ban was eventually lifted, details from the investigation emerged. During the trial, lab technicians revealed that approximately 80 unidentified DNA profiles, split evenly between male and female, were found on various
Whoa.
pieces of evidence. But I think that could also be like what you're saying about, like,
The party
could he just
goers.
say, like, oh, I have the 2,000 people at a party?
Yeah, that's fair.
Authorities discovered a loaded .22 revolver with a dildo attached to the barrel, boxes of
Okay.
.357 Magnum ammunition, night vision goggles, faux fur-lined handcuffs, a syringe filled with a blue liquid, and a substance known as Spanish fly inside Pickton's trailer.
Yeah, y'all want to test that blue liquid or like?
Yeah, what is the blue
What
liquid?
is
Is that the
it?
Spanish fly? I don't
You
know.
telling me y'all can't figure that out?
In a videotape shown to the jury, Pickton absurdly claimed that he had used the dildo as a makeshift silencer. He said, "This should do it."
Also, why though?
Right.
Also, why did you need a silencer?
And why did you, and like when you thought, like, I need a silencer, fuck, what do I get? A dildo?
A dildo in the house that me and my brother live in alone?
Right. Well, I mean, it's here and we're not using it, obviously.
Someone must have left it for one of our parties.
Oh, yeah.
The political
What am
elites
I gonna
left
do
it
with
behind.
it? No, we're
I'm
actually
just a
thinking of it
recycler.
backwards.
Oh.
I'm thinking of it backwards. He found the dildo and he's like, what could I use this for?
Yeah.
A silencer?
Yeah. I don't actually need a silencer, but let's just see if it works.
Yeah. Another tape featured Scott Chubb. Chubb. Stinky Piggy. A friend of Pickton who recounted that Pickton suggested a lethal method for killing female heroin addicts by injecting them with windshield washer fluid.
That's the blue liquid?
I think that might be. A second video.
How did his theory pan out? Do we know?
It doesn't say what the blue liquid is.
No, but like, does the friend know if he ever tried it and was successful?
I think that's what he was telling his friend.
Oh, okay.
A second video included Andrew Bellwood, another associate, who stated that Pickton spoke about killing sex workers by handcuffing, strangling, and then disposing of them, allegedly feeding their remains to pigs. Photos shown to the jury depicted the contents of a garbage can found in Pickton's slaughterhouse, which contained the remains of Mona Wilson. On December 9th, 2007, the jury found Pickton not guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder, but guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder.
Okay. Like they just said we do not have enough information?
At what point are you like, okay, you can't have accidentally killed that many people?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
That's
like, I guess
insane.
I understand the philosophy that like he's probably going to go to jail for like the same amount of time and like, or prison and like whatever. And it's like, technically, like we don't know what happened in each instance, but it's like, yeah, in sheer number, like he didn't manslaughter. Yeah. And I get that they're not allowed to think about the other 20, but still, he didn't manslaughter 6 people. He didn't accidentally.
Like at what
point? And isn't second degree like heat of the moment? So it's like if you can heat of the moment passion murder 6 people, who's to say after the 5th you weren't like, this is kind of fun, let me plan one.
Right. So like first degree murder is like premeditated, you sought them out, murdered them. Second degree murder is like you meant to kill them, but you didn't.
It was in the moment.
It wasn't premeditated.
Yeah.
Manslaughter is accident. You killed them by accident, but you did intend to harm them.
Right.
But so yeah, like at what point are we like, okay, at this point,
He did do it.
You are seeking these women out.
Yeah. He at least
Whatever.
wasn't mad when it happened the 6th time.
He was
like,
how do I keep finding myself in these
oh my
situations?
god!
It's like it opens up on like a 90s sitcom and he's like, I bet you're wondering how I ended up here.
Yeah. I am.
I came here on purpose.
Yeah.
I premeditated this.
It's almost as if.
2 days later, Justice James Williams sentenced Pickton to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years, the maximum penalty for second-degree murder. He emphasized the brutal nature of Pickton's actions, stating, quote, Mr. Pickton's conduct was murderous and repeatedly so. What happened to them was senseless and despicable.
Wait, without parole for 25 years?
Mm.
So he'll spend life in prison, but after 25 years, he actually might be up for parole. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On December 9, 2007, he was convicted of the second-degree murders of Serena Abbotsway, Mona Wilson, Andrea Joesbury, Brenda Wolfe, Georgina Papin, and Marnie Leanne Frey. Charges for the first-degree murders of the other 20 women were stayed on August 4th, 2010.
They said, enough.
Yeah. We got him.
So actually, we were thinking of it backwards. They said 26 is too many. They can only handle 6.
Yeah.
They're not actually going to do anything with the other 20.
Right. Pickton was implicated in the deaths of 4 additional women, but was never charged with their murders. They were 25-year-old Mary Ann Clark, who disappeared in August of 1991. 20-year-old Stephanie Lane, who disappeared in January of 1997. 42-year-old Dawn Teresa Cray, who was last seen in December of 2000. And Yvonne Marie Bowen, who was reported missing on March 16th, 2001, after failing to show up for a visit with her mother and her son. Stephanie Lane's partial remains were actually found, but were misplaced between 2003 and 2010.
By who?
Dawn Cray's family had reported her missing shortly after she had last been seen. She had been the victim of a violent acid attack and was in constant contact with her family members during her recovery.
Oh, man.
It wasn't like a recent attack, but like I think the way they said it was like after the attack, like her family would have expected to hear from her more
she had
often.
A new lease on life.
Right. Both Dawn's and Yvonne's DNA were later found on the Pickton farm. On January 7th, 2008, the Attorney General took action by appealing the acquittals of Robert Pickton on first-degree murder charges in the British Columbia Court of Appeal. The appeal focused on various evidentiary decisions made by the trial judges, issues with jury instructions, and the decision to separate 6 charges from 20 others the Pickton faced. Despite being acquitted of first-degree murder, Pickton was convicted of second-degree murder and received a sentence equivalent of that to a first-degree murder conviction. Victims' families voiced worries about the potential jeopardy of the convictions if the Crown suggested judicial errors.
Yeah.
Criticism arose from opposition politician Leonard Krog.
Leonard, did you used to go to those parties?
Who noted the lack of communication with victims' family before the appeal was announced. Wally Opal, the Attorney General, extended an apology to the victims' families for not alerting them to the appeal beforehand. He explained that the appeal was strategically timed in anticipation of a defense appeal. According to court rules, the Crown had a 30-day window to file an appeal following the December 9th verdicts, while the defense had until December 11th after sentencing. On January 9th, 2008, Pickton's legal team lodged their own appeal in the British Columbia Court of Appeal, seeking a new trial on 6 counts of second-degree murder. The defense highlighted several alleged errors by the trial judge, including how the jury was instructed, responses to their questions, and the handling of Pickton's police statements. The British Columbia Court of Appeal delivered its ruling on June 25th, 2009, dismissing the defense appeal with a 2-1 majority. However, due to a dissent on a legal point, Pickton was permitted to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada without prior approval. His notice of appeal was filed on August 24th, 2009. The Court of Appeal decided to uphold the Crown appeal, concluding that the trial judge had incorrectly excluded certain evidence and improperly severed charges. Nonetheless, the conviction for the 6 counts of second-degree murder remained intact. On June 26, 2009, Pickton's lawyers confirmed their intention to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, focusing on the dissent from the British Columbia Court of Appeal. Although Pickton had an automatic right to appeal based on legal issues, his lawyers also sought to expand the appeal's scope. On November 26, 2009, the Supreme Court granted this application. But ultimately, on July 30th, 2010, the Supreme Court dismissed Pickton's appeal and upheld his convictions. The justices unanimously rejected the argument for a new trial, although they differed in their legal interpretations. Following the Supreme Court's ruling, British Columbia Crown spokesman Neil McKenzie indicated that the prosecution of the remaining 20 murder charges would likely be discontinued, as any additional convictions wouldn't affect Pickton's sentencing. Victims' families had mixed reactions, with some disappointed by the lack of the further convictions, while others were relieved to avoid the gruesome details of their family members' murders being aired out in court.
Yeah.
In 2010, the Vancouver Police Department announced a thorough review of the missing women investigation and indicated that a public inquiry would be necessary for an impartial examination of the delays in Pickton's arrest. Like those 3 searches.
Mm-hmm.
And then not going to look in the freezer.
Yes, sure.
The investigators' details, which became available after the lifting of a publication ban in August 2010, raised significant concerns about police bias, particularly regarding marginalized communities. At a press conference, Deputy Chief Constable Doug Lepard apologized to the victims' families, expressing regret for the failures in the investigation and the lost lives that could have been saved. Too little, too late, friend.
Yeah. Again, it's too late for that.
Following the Supreme Court's ruling, a Missing Women Commission of Inquiry was established to investigate the roles of the Vancouver Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in the cases of missing and murdered women in the downtown East Side. The final report was submitted on November 19th, 2012, and publicly released on December 17th. During the inquiry, there were attempts to introduce unpublished materials as evidence, but not all were made public. On August 4th, 2010, it was determined that Pickton should be moved to a federal penitentiary. He was eventually transferred in June 2018 from Kent Institution in British Columbia to Port Coquitlam
Fancy
Institution in Quebec. The children of Pickton's victims filed a civil lawsuit in May of 2013 against the Vancouver Police Department, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the Crown for failing to protect their mothers. They were able to reach a settlement in March of 2014. Each of them was compensated 50,000 Canadian dollars without admission of liability. As of February 2024, Pickton became eligible to apply for day parole. However, no hearing was scheduled by the Parole Board of Canada. And then, On May 19th, 2024, Pickton was attacked by another prisoner at the Port Cartier institution in Quebec. The other inmate, Martin Charest, speared Pickton in the head with the broken handle of a broom.
Nice.
He was airlifted to the hospital and put on life support, but died in the hospital on May 31st.
Wow.
During his time in prison, Pickton confessed to the murders of 49 women to a man he thought was just another inmate, but who actually turned out to be an undercover officer. The Pickton Pig Farm is the largest crime scene in Canadian history to date, and this case remains a haunting chapter in the history of criminal justice in Canada, illustrating the complexities of a legal system and the profound impact of heinous acts on victims, families, and communities.
Wow. Wow.
The end.
Crazy. Good job.
What did you think? Thank
Crazy.
you.
It's just so nuts.
It really
and crazy.
Is.
So
It's crazy. And it's
yeah.
crazy too.
And it's also crazy.
I cannot believe.
And that's all I have to say. That it's crazy.
Thanks for coming.
Yes. Anything?
Okay.
Any final thoughts, Mary?
No. He's gross looking.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah.
I am sure that he is. It's just also funny to me when they confess to like 49. Ain't no fucking way he knows. You think he was keeping track after 24? No.
Right. Yeah. I think what I'm gonna start doing is like I don't know, whatever case I in some way link in my head, I will do next. So
it's a free for all now, folks.
Yeah, so now I'm bebopping around.
Yeah, but what if they all end up so similar?
They won't. It's like little things that I'm like pinging. Ghost hi. Thank you.
Hey, bye.
Bye. They have to keep that in.
So this.